interrupting the PBS coverage of today's attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C. to bring you the special edition of News 22 Tuesday, which tonight will cover just one story, today's attack and the local impact. I'm Elizabeth Herrera.
And I'm Charles Comer. Anger, confusion, sadness, horror, just a few of the words that might describe how residents are feeling in the aftermath of the attacks this morning in New York City and the nation's capital. It's being described in a number of ways, but perhaps the best description is the worst attack since Pearl Harbor. But perhaps worse because it was a civilian building and innocent people who were targeted. Locally, there's a sense of outrage, a feeling of a loss of security, sadness over the thousands of deaths, concerns about the fate of loved ones, and the desire to help victims and find the perpetrators. Tonight, News 22 will take you across the region to give you an idea of how the event has impacted local military installations, courts, schools, businesses, and state, local, and federal government. And later, we'll speak to an NMSU political analyst about today's events. But first, let's take a look at some of the ways local residents are reacting.
Someone is responsible, and someone needs to pay. There needs to be repercussions for this, and we don't need to talk. We don't need to make peace treaties. Someone needs to pay for this.
This could have all been prevented. It could have been avoided.
I think that we're going to see an extra level of effort exerted by the United States to try to find those involved.
That something like that could happen. I mean, what if it was us or a family member on the plane, you know? Just thinking that many planes could be taken at once and have happened what happened.
Fairly certain that he wasn't in the World Trade Center. He worked a few blocks down from there. So, but I still had that concern that he might have been on the street or could have gotten injured.
My sister works in a place called the Floating Hospital, which is a hospital on a boat in New York Harbor. And she's an administrator of the hospital there, and it's within very close distance of the World Trade Center. And so my first thought, in addition to my shock and horror this morning, was, is she okay?
I basically could not believe that something like this would happen here. And I flipped on the TV, and there it was, you know, the two smoking towers.
It's just a somber moment for all of us, but in the darkest of moments, you'll see the brightest of lights, so I think we'll triumph as a nation.
And we know tonight that at least one local resident was aboard one of those planes that smashed into the World Trade Center in New York. Former Alamogordo Police Lieutenant Al Marchand was a flight attendant aboard one of the planes. Marchand was with the department from 1980 until last March. He lived in the Alamogordo area and wanted to get his pilot's license. If you need information on anyone who you think may have been aboard on one of those planes that crashed today, here's how you can contact. The number for American Airlines is 1-800-245-0999. And United Airlines also has a toll-free number for friends and family to call and check on flights. It's 1-800-932-8555. United also is posting information on their website, and that address is united.com. And many people in Las Cruces were not just talking, they were also taking action.
They sure were. Long lines formed in front of United Blood Services. As calls went out for help to increase the blood supply, there was up to a 4-hour wait to get in.
Everyone is incredibly patient. They just know it's the right thing to do. Everyone has kept completely calm and totally focused on just doing what we need to do as quickly and efficiently as we can do it.
Perhaps by coincidence, there was a class on campus today dealing with the issue of terrorism.
Now, today's session, of course, focused on what most people are calling the worst ever terrorist attack in history. And it looks like they don't have that ready for us, so we're going to go ahead and go to the next story.
Actually, yeah, we do have a really big story, very important, that will keep you updated on some things that are going all around our region, and some closures, things like that, some special things people were doing. So let's go to that video now. Gary Worth has more.
Not be one of the biggest in the nation, but like every airport across the country, no flights were allowed to leave today. 2 planes were grounded, their pilots had nothing to do but wait.
I began flying in 1972, and I've never heard of airspace being closed down nationwide in the United States before.
Also, at local military installations, a heightened sense of security. At White Sands, all non-essential personnel were sent home, and only those who had a specific reason to be on the job were allowed in. Also, the elementary school on the base was closed.
Ordinarily, if you were coming on post, you would show a badge, or they'd look at your sticker and wave you through. As you see right now, every car is being stopped. Every car is being inspected. Every person driving that car or inside that car is being inspected.
At Holloman Air Force Base near Alamogordo, it was a slightly different story. The base wasn't closed, but there was a heightened sense of security.
Due to the events that have happened and the security concerns for our people, for our resources, we are near the highest state of readiness we could be at.
The NASA facility outside Las Cruces closed. Inside the city limits, the federal building was surrounded by guards, even though earlier today we were told it was business as usual inside. The state district court closed, and congressional offices wouldn't even let our cameras get close. County commissioners went ahead with their meeting after a moment of silence this morning, while the city let residents watch events unfold on a big screen TV in City Hall. Schools like Conley Elementary remained open in Las Cruces, but the kids were getting special counseling.
They're scared. They're afraid that there are bombs going to be going off here at the school in Las Cruces. They're very concerned and nervous about their own safety and what's happening. And they really don't have an idea where New York is, where Washington is. They just know that people are afraid and people are dying, and they're afraid for themselves and their families.
The students' parents will be getting a letter telling them how to counsel their children. New Mexico State University also remained open, but there was a debate over whether classes should have been canceled. Between classes, students gathered to watch the television coverage of the attacks at Corbett Center. And outside,
So you're saying we should just brush this off? No, it's okay because...
arguments over how the U.S. should react.
Is it wrong for me to care for like thousands of human lives that have just been destroyed for a political statement on the part of bin Laden, who wants to come and say that it's America's fault that everything is so messed up there, and that, well, we've got to spread the word or let people know that there's something wrong. And the best way to do that is to blow up 2 of the largest buildings that hold over 50,000 people, that hold our uncles and our grandfathers and our fathers and our mothers and our children. And I can't see how anyone could even begin to justify the actions that have gone on here today.
The campus ROTC was closed, members dressed in street clothing, and some very angry.
Extreme rage. I've got a adrenaline up here, adrenaline flowing through my body. I want to defend our nation, and just unbelievably angry and hurt and devastated to think that an attack could be done on our soil.
The general consensus, a feeling of deep sorrow for the victims and outrage that something like this could happen on American soil. Gary Worth, News 22.
And that is very interesting to see what comments the students have here on campus.
Yeah, never short on opinion here at NMSU.
In fact, there was a lot of that earlier today. We went ahead and went to one of the classes. It was somewhat of an intelligence class, and the professor had a lot of feedback, and he was answering a lot of questions with the students, and we're going to have that report coming up.
The World Trade Center coming down.
But today might be a day that you will remember in your generation, because today is a day when we first had what appears to be the first massive attack in the United States.
Dr. Ralph Tilden is an intelligence officer in the Central Intelligence Agency, better known as the CIA. He has a background in the proliferation of weapons and mass destruction, and with today's terrorism attacks, his class on intelligence was full of questions and comments.
I'm going to try to deal with as many questions that the students may have as possible, considering the fact that I'm but what I see and what I know is basically what we've all seen on television, and to try to fold into the idea the intelligence process, how the intelligence process works, and some advantages and disadvantages.
What was mostly discussed was the mastermind behind the terrorism attacks. Dr. Tilden points out many interesting facts that one may not notice, like the date of the attack, September 11th. September, the 9th month of the year, and the date 11/9/11, numbers used for help.
What happened today was big.
Dr. Tilden talks about 4 planes hijacked, hitting 2 out of 3 suspected targets, each target containing strong symbolism: the Pentagon symbolizing U.S. military establishment, the World Trade Center symbolizing commercial in the United States, and the suspected 3rd target, Camp David, a place of retirement for the President of the United States. Also commented on were the planes, each with enough fuel to travel across the U.S.
With the full amount of fuel so they could cause the massive amount of destruction.
Dr. Tilden says if you just look at the details of the attack, it is well thought out. He believes in this situation the government is not to blame. He says no one should point fingers just yet. He just hopes the students will learn from this horrible incident.
Stay calm. Stay calm. Keep the faith. Things will work out the way they're supposed to. God is in charge.
Well, that sounds like pretty good advice. At NMSU, as events were unfolding, there was a moment of chaos at Corbett Center today.
News 22 reporter Ben Baldwin was trying to get reactions around campus when panic set in. Ben joins us now live in the newsroom with more. Ben.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Liz. Just before 11 o'clock today, Corbett Center, one of the largest buildings on the campus of New Mexico State, was evacuated. As far away from the terrorist attacks as Las Cruces is, today it appeared that it may have had an effect here. This morning, as the nation was just learning about the attacks, there was a panic at Corbett Center, and at the time, it had reporters like me confused. At approximately 10:52 today, Corbett Center, the student union here at New Mexico State University, was evacuated. We're not sure as to what reason or what the reasons were or why, but as you can see behind me, hundreds of students are being evacuated from Corbett Center at New Mexico State University. Students and faculty who had been evacuated stood by anxiously anticipating word on the situation.
Well, it's been very tense all morning, that's for sure, but the alarm went off in the bookstore, and I was just busy trying to make sure we got everybody evacuated out of the bookstore, but I didn't receive any calls from the building manager or anything about what it's about. This is what we automatically do, is just make sure we evacuate the building when this happens.
Finally, after about 15 minutes of waiting, the tense situation settled. The building was reopened and the emergency crews retreated, and officials were able to explain what actually happened.
We had a sewer line back up, and the sewer line actually broke. The water that flowed down onto a ceiling migrated into a smoke detector, caused the smoke detector to short out, and that caused the fire alarm system to activate. The building was evacuated. We already had plumbers on scene, but we had to roll the fire department over here to physically shut off the fire alarm so that we could allow people to go back into the building. Our thoughts and prayers go out to all of the people that have been impacted by the events as they are unfolding. I think that this is especially nerve-wracking to the students and staff that were inside the building when they have a fire alarm go off and a need to evacuate the building, especially with the things that are happening in the world. But fortunately, this event was simply a sewer line problem and nothing more than that, and we're already back in the building and everything's okay.
So what started as a very tense situation panned out to become just a normal everyday occurrence that just happened on this grave day. Reporting live in the newsroom, I'm Ben Baldwin, News 22.
Okay,
thanks,
thank you, Ben. Today's events had a number of other impacts, didn't they, Charles?
That's right. Let's take a look at a long list of closures, postponements, and more. Los Alamos National Labs is understandably on heightened alert, and the facility has been closed. The State Court of Appeals was closed, but the New Mexico Supreme Court remained open. The state capitol was evacuated after a bomb threat was called in. State prisons are on alert, and officials are keeping prisoners in their cell blocks. The New Mexico State Fair in Albuquerque is closed until noon tomorrow. The National Guard is on alert. Flights are all being diverted, and border crossings are all open.
We know of at least 2 events that have been canceled due to the attacks on the East Coast. A new cancer care center in Las Cruces that's fixing to break ground has postponed the event, and the Wednesday night EPA Superfund hearing concerning water contamination has been delayed until experts from out of town can fly in. Now, we do have a guest joining us now live in our studio is Government Professor Jose Garcia, who has an expertise on international relations, and he's here to talk about today's terrorist attacks. Thank you, Dr. Garcia, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Dr. Garcia. First off, we want to know, what is your opinion on the whole incident?
Well, this is the Pearl Harbor of the post-Cold War period. The Pentagon was attacked today. Symbol of American power and American military might. New York City was attacked today, symbol of our nation's economic power, and our people were attacked today. So this one strikes us to the core, and what we have to do is find out who did it and respond appropriately.
Okay, now we watched what President Bush had to say. What was your response to his speech?
Well, I don't think he said a whole lot. He was trying to be reassuring and calm people down. I thought he had one good line when he said that you can destroy the foundations of a building, but you cannot destroy the foundations of our society. I think that's true, and I think that was a memorable line.
Okay. Did Bush's speech meet up to your expectations? Were you expecting him to say what he did say during his speech?
Well, there's not much that he really could have said. I mean, we know what's happened, and we needed to be reassured that the government was working and functioning properly. And I think that was what he intended, and that's what came out.
Well, thank you, Doctor. Now, do we have a clue who might be behind this series of attacks?
We may have a clue as to who did this. We certainly know that this was well planned, well executed. It was more than just 3 or 4 individuals working together. But it's probably not right at this particular moment to speculate and to sort of allege who might have been doing this. What we really need to do is find out and have good, solid proof of who did it and why, and then respond appropriately.
Liz?
Dr. Garcia, I know a lot of people are asking themselves, what's next? What is your response to that?
Well, I think what's next is take a deep breath. I think the government needs to roll up its sleeves. We need to have a unified effort. We need to get all of our intelligence agencies and Pentagon working together, find out who did this, and retaliate.
Now, President Bush said that without a doubt the U.S. will retaliate. Is that a proper response? And if he's talking about retaliation, at what level are we looking at here?
Well, I don't think there's any alternatives. We have to find out who did it, and we need to retaliate. We need to take some measures to make sure this doesn't happen again. The problem is we don't know who to retaliate against right now, and until we find out, then it's not appropriate to be talking about what kind of response or when the response will come. But that we should retaliate, I think, is without doubt.
Now, let's just talk about opinion. One thing we've heard all day long since early this morning is the name Osama bin Laden. Now, of course, we want to be responsible and not speculate, but how possible is it that bin Laden is either directly responsible or indirectly in that he may have provided training for whatever terrorist group did carry this out?
Well, of course, bin Laden is probably the most sophisticated terrorist group in the world today, certainly capable of planning and perhaps executing this. That doesn't necessarily mean that they did it, nor necessarily mean that they harbored them, but certainly they must be on the top list of intelligence officers in the United States today.
Now we're looking at the look in New York and Washington. How will this affect us locally here in Las Cruces?
Well, I think we've already seen a couple of local impacts, just simply the closures and the confusion and so on. I think more lastingly what we're likely to have is longer lines as we cross the bridges into Mexico and out of Mexico, and we're likely to have more difficulty getting onto airplanes when we get onto into the airport at El Paso.
Now, Dr. Garcia, we have a lot of viewers. What is the main message you want to send out to them?
I think the message would be stay calm, take a deep breath. We need to realize that we cannot afford to give up the freedoms that we're accustomed to because of this incident, no matter how barbaric and horrible it might be. We need to keep in mind the freedoms that we fought for 2 centuries to uphold.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. Now, you can get more information on today's events in a special edition of the Las Cruces Sun News.
The local newspaper rushed to get a special edition onto the streets. Vendors were out selling them today, and they were going like hotcakes as residents clamored for as much information as they can get about the attacks.
Now, there are several events planned to help residents deal with the terrorist attacks. That includes a candlelight vigil tonight at NMSU. It will be held on the outdoor stage east of Corbett Center starting at 7 tonight. Also tonight, Bishop Ricardo Ramirez will say Mass at the Immaculate Heart of Mary Cathedral. That is also starting at 7. We will continue with the national coverage, but let's take a look at tonight's program schedule. And there it is, 7 o'clock. We have News Hour coverage, 8 Talking to Kids, History of the Future at 8:30, being served at 10, and we will have World News 10:30 tonight.
So try to return to normal. Now, that's what we have for you tonight, and thanks for joining us. I'm Charles Comer.
And I'm Liz Herrera. We now return to our News Hour coverage of today's tragic events.